And I'm very delighted to now introduce Jeremy Shaw. And we're going to screen his film and then have a conversation, his film Liminals. When Steffi rang a couple of months ago and said the topic would be this idea of reconquering, it reminded me of a conversation we had actually with Jeremy about affect and this idea of reconquering affect, human affect in a way, through the work. And for me, his film Liminals was one of the great highlights of 2017, the highlight of the Venice Biennale. It's a piece I just couldn't get out of my mind. Seeing it kept coming back to my mind. It's a piece which is very much about the future of extinction, in which we find periphery, altruist cultures that try to save humankind through fast evolution. One of these groups is the Liminals, who use forgotten rituals to access the space between the physical and the virtual. Shaw's video installation, initially, and you will see that it seems to be a 60s, 70s documentary film, but then all of a sudden shifts into a digital sci-fi film that creates a state of trance via immersed sound, visual effects, and also strobe lights. Jeremy's parafictional work engages various cathartic behaviors, including modern dance, kundalini, and also, very importantly, headbanging. And as always with Jeremy, it is all about transcendence. Please give a very, very warm welcome to Jeremy Shaw and his film Liminals.
Hello. Hi. So we're just going to play a kind of 5-minute condensed version of a 30-minute film that I made last year that premiered in Venice at the Biennale. So take it as a kind of trailer of how the film unfolds. We can play.
Residing in the northwestern quarter of the landscape, liminals gather in unoccupied spaces to engage in some of the most extreme experiments of any documented periphery altruist culture. Named in direct reference to their search for a paraspace known as the liminal, liminals speculate that this space can be incited and accessed through a mixture of contemporary technology and antiquated human tradition. Their commitment is revealed in the augmenting of their brain chemistry with machine DNA, in combination with engagement in abandoned physical forms of pre-quantification spiritual ritual. If successfully accessed, the liminal is claimed to be a seamless amalgamation of the physical and the virtual, a paraspace where corporeality and egoistic cognition dissolve, giving way to a unified omnipresence of collapsed time, space, and energy. It is here the liminals prophesize that a new phase in human evolution will have the opportunity to manifest.
Like, share about that. Was from come to sing and to share act them. Meditants gather, Hortons gather, who's Martillo, Horton sleeper. And essentially, that we also build this into a kind of to do that. And that we really need as an trans house from this around, that is rules from all around so adult, gives us Hortons to unconnect also other chanters and other words, say that they can also chanters and with us. The free have to wish pity to be clear and to better and share one another. But they have wished to use three, so the horse and brain sets and slowly and steadily, and they ability to reader, and they use not their culture, their innate.
The notion of rapture and all of its variables died with the quantification. In the 3 generations since use of the unit was introduced, the freely available VR system of simulated spiritual experience had effectively filled this void. The resultant degeneration of our brain's inferior temporal gyrus has been so traumatic and prolonged that we have lost the physiological capability of spiritual experience entirely. And as the announcement tragically revealed to us, faith had become an essential evolutionary aspect of human biology, and thus of our continued survival.
Because ain't love us, you know? When we do your part to do that, why can that not love us spontaneously? And therefore we are shopping here. We're writing each other, we're shopping on love, we're shopping with each other, we let all emotions wake up our fighting. And we're rounding sending. We're rounding send all with chakra. And we're consciously of your orca. And so orca in order to give G to the rated. And we sing over your orc moment. Because we are orcanid out of all one, 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 one.
Now, Jeremy, the film is clearly a pseudo-science fiction documentary, and it sort of centers on the notion of rapture, transcendence. It involves drugs, art, religion. I was kind of wondering if you could talk a little bit about the tension, which is between the otherworldliness of sci-fi and then the present possibilities in our 21st century for the human body kind of operating together in your work.
I think, I've kind of arrived at science fiction as this place where I could incorporate all of these varying interests in things that kind of revolve back to altered states and this age-old human quest for transcendence. So within the parameters of a sort of fantastic science fiction story, I can incorporate both the cultural attempts to achieve these transcendent states as well as the scientific attempts to map and translate them or explain them. So yeah, I think that's how I've arrived within that. Is that what you asked?
Yeah, and the film is part of a trilogy.
Yeah.
There is basically one film which you did before and one film which will be ready soon, and this is the film in the middle. Can you tell us about how it's embedded in the trilogy and what the trilogy is about?
Sure. Well, this is basically part two. The first piece took place 500 years in the future with a type of post-human called quantum humans, who were effectively attempting to become human again via human behaviors that had been lost in the evolution to quantum human. So things like belief and faith, art, dancing, religion. And that one uses actual found footage from a 1967 film about Pentecostal Christian snake handlers. And so it's been reworked to tell this story 500 years in the future. Then there's this one that's 100 years in the future. And then so using 16 millimeter again. And then the newest one that's called I Can See Forever takes place only about 30 years from now, and it uses a VHS medium to explain a story about a single person who was born with 10% machine DNA. So whereas the first two were all about kind of this notion of community and abandon to achieve catharsis, the new one is focused more on a single person and then the idea of virtuosity and control as a way to achieve catharsis.
And that's, of course, something which has also to do with your collaboration with choreographers and dancers. You talked before about the virtuosity of the dancers. Can you tell us about these collaborations?
Well, yeah, I've worked a lot with dancers in the past, and the one I've worked with for the new film is a virtuosic dancer who worked with the came from William Forsythe's company. So yeah, something I've seen as another aspect of this ability to abandon is this ability to get lost in the control of virtuosity.
And then transcendence is always there. I mean, the trilogy is very much held together like all your previous work. When we met in the context of Based in Berlin, already your early work had always to do with transcendence. And I always had the feeling that connects somehow to your background in music. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the connection to music and transcendence really as the umbilical cord.
Well, I think, yeah, music was something that, it's this really immediate kind of visceral instant gratification style of catharsis, I think, or something that people go to very quickly or often when looking for this type of behavior. And so, yeah, having this background in music has helped in furthering my works, and that they're not simply just about, the early works of mine were really about catharsis, about people searching for some type of transcendence. And as they've evolved, I've added this element which almost always happens in my works, is there's a moment where there's manipulation towards the viewer, and there's always manipulation all the way through the film, but I use music quite often, music, slow motion, visual effects, as a way to attempt to elicit a phenomenological response from the viewer themselves. So oftentimes you're watching people in this real quest for some type of enlightenment, and then I'm slowly attempting to elicit some type of similar response, or at least phenomenological response from the viewer. And music is a huge, huge factor in that.
And of course, we're going to have later today here in this very room in the afternoon one of the world's greatest pianists, Igor Levit, where we're then going to discuss further the theme of music, virtuosity, transcendence with him. We're also going to have later this afternoon Nora Khan with us, who wrote on your work, Jeremy, and is very specialized in connections between art and technology, and is going to talk about art and VR, art and AR, the augmented reality, entering the art world. And Nora Khan wrote the text on your work as part of an exhibition in Berlin. The text is called Towards Universal Pattern Recognition. And Steffi Czerny always says, DLD is about patterns that connect. So I thought it's kind of nice to kind of, dive into this text by Nora. And I'm going to quote here from the text. Nora wrote, "The proposition of the early 21st century that there was nothing living that could not eventually be quantified had a brief hiccup at creativity. It slid to a full halt at the issue of spiritual feeling. The pristine map of human affect seemed to have holes burned through it." And that ties in with what I said in the introduction, this reconquering, of human affect. And a very significant part of your research, and we must say that for all these films, you make an epic, very encyclopedic research. So a significant part of this research and practice deals actually with question of human affect, of what lies beyond the quantifiable or perceptual realm of everyday experience. So I wanted to ask you a little bit to tell us about your interest in the wholes of human affect and where this started.
I think it started from a very young age. I was always somehow interested in altered states. Even when I was a really young kid, I used to do this game where I would knock myself out with my friends. So we would black out, we would choke ourselves and black out. So it's always been there. But I think it really manifested fully when I made a film or a video installation in 2004 called DMT, where I had people taking a really psychedelic drug called dimethyltryptamine. And this drug is, truly mind-blowing experience where you basically, you're incapacitated for 10 to 15 minutes. And when you come back, what I had the subjects do is attempt to explain the experience. And right there is where I really, really noted severely that it was beyond language. So the experience had sort of reached, language was totally failing in attempting to ascribe, to elucidate these experiences. So I think that was the real kind of beginning point for the past 15 years of research into these objects of things that seem to be outside of at least our language,
And language leads to my next question, because language is, of course, very much embedded in the production, we can say maybe of the production of human subjectivity. I read Maurizio Lazzarato the other day, who says that to produce a new discourse, to produce new knowledge, to produce a new politics, one must actually traverse an unnameable point, what he calls a point of absolute non-narrative, of non-culture, of non-knowledge. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you see language as functioning in your work, perhaps as something that goes beyond the linguistic and leads us into another realm.
Well, it's something I play with a lot. As you saw there's this, we've figured out a way to scramble the language so that it appears to be, these people appear to be speaking some type of dialect that refers to English, but it's not English. And then you're reading subtitles that are English. So at least personally in my work, there's this using language as a way to instill a cognitive dissonance with the viewer, which I think creates a real, an instant uncertainty around the work. But I'm sorry, I totally just forgot exactly what you asked there.
No, I mean, basically, it's a question just about language.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's it's something I come back to all the time, the notions of translation and back to DMT, this inability to truly elucidate is something I think we're fraught with, but I also find to be really quite romantic, quite exciting. Something that I kind of amplify in the work, I think, is that failure.
And maybe a last question about your unrealized projects. One of the great things about DLD is always that, we ask artists and architects to tell us about their unrealized projects, also in relation to technology, and very often they then become a reality. Last year, Rem Koolhaas said that his unrealized project is to build a data center, and he's now building the data center. A few years earlier, he said he wanted to kind of invent a new Black Mountain College, and through DLD that happened with Strelka actually, and the school became a built reality. So I thought, so not in terms of utopia, but very pragmatically,
Right.
We talk about unrealized projects to make them happen. And I mean, you do have an interest in technology. You're very interested in AI, which you call, in an interview, the inevitable evolution of humanity. You see also AI as an evolution, as a kind of a form of transcendence. So I wanted to ask you to tell us a little bit about your interest in AI, and also if you've got any unrealized projects with technology, any kind of dreams or projects which are too big to be realized, or anything, we could be helpful to bridge you to.
Well, the interest in AI is like a lot of my interest in these things that are beyond my grasp. It's more a sort of romance with the language of it, similar to my interest in neuroscience, AI, these things that I don't truly understand them, and I get quite excited listening to someone speak about them because it's totally a foreign language to me. And as an artist, I kind of, I sponge as much as I can and I reach a critical mass with it, and that's it. So with AI, it's really like using it in a poetic sort of sense for me, really. To refer to it, it's quite loaded when I drop that in there. But my actual understanding of it is slim, to be honest. As far as
second part, unrealized project.
Unrealized. There's so many unrealized projects. I have this giant list, and they can be the smallest thing, like I don't know, dipping canvas in psilocybin or something. But there's nothing super massive at the moment, except that I'm starting to work on some of these, and with the new film, we're actually, whereas the scrambling of the language was really quite crass in those first ones, we're actually creating a new language right now. So maybe that's a dream of some sort, an unrealized project. But yeah, they're all really quite minor. I don't have any. I used to think I wanted to remake the film Altered States from 1980. I wanted to make an updated version of this Hollywood film about a scientist who takes mushrooms in a flotation tank and then reverts to being primordial man. So maybe that's it. Maybe I'm gonna remake this movie. My first feature.
That could not be a better conclusion. Jeremy, thank you so much. Thank you all.
Pleasure.